there's
Yeah.
like a delay on YouTube, and yeah.
All right.
There's like a percentage bar up the top. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
like.
So yeah, I think we're live.
Hmm.
All right. After like a minor technical issue. Hi everyone, and welcome. Let's give folks a minute or two to join in, and while we wait, you can tell us in the chat. I mean, whoever already logged in, what's your favorite sustainability buzzwords that you secretly love or hate, even more secretly maybe? While you're on it, a quick warm-up question to our speakers. What's the one sustainability villain your team would love to defeat? Like for good. Could be bad data, greenwashing, scope 3 emissions, anything goes. Just name one.
Hmm.
So for me, it's the crowd's paradox, because in the sustainability world, you have so many people, each with different opinions, that in the end, this huge crowd that you have is not pulling in the same direction. Everyone has a different opinion on what is exactly the perfect, whatever, emission reduction project, perfect reporting standard, perfect circularity way. And there's a lot of infighting within the community. So that is the demon or the villain that I would like to fight.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. That's a good villain or bad villain. Like, yeah. Maria?
I think like I don't know if I would call it environmental pessimism. Like sometimes I kind of dislike people just complaining about solutions not being quite the right solution or not really fixing all the problems or exactly that problem. And I like to think that everybody that works in this space are trying to fix a problem through a specific angle, and we're all kind of trying to figure out how to fix a massive issue. So less pessimism and a bit more like constructive, way of thinking around it would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. More structured project management to it.
Mm.
Julian?
Yeah, it's so I would just stick to the other ones. So it's definitely like a mixture of all. So what we're currently facing is that actually the political environment, especially in the EU, they are just heavily working against ESG and see ESG more as a burden than as an opportunity. So just from the global perspective, I would definitely fight that one so that we do have like better, clear visual structures or guidelines, or even the freedom to decide. However, this currently leads to the situation that where a lot of companies, a lot of individuals rather feel ESG as a burden and also tech as a burden rather than a chance to really have an impact. In fact.
Mm.
Thanks, Julian. And yeah, thank you everyone for the input. Let's kick this off. So we're here to dig into something that's both urgent and exciting. How to build tech teams that actually drive real climate impact, and what are the challenges that come with it. Before we jump in, I've got to give a quick shout out to the marketing team at Beetroot who brought us all together today. And Beetroot is a tech partner that helps businesses grow their engineering capabilities through team extensions, software development, and tech training. Positive impact has been a part of our mission from day one, and we're especially passionate about working with organizations that are driving real change. That's why we're here today. And I think it's time to bring in the people who actually know what they're talking about. Let's meet the folks who are doing the real work in tech for sustainability, our today's speakers. Please meet Marco Hosbrunner, co-CEO at Swarmy. Marco helps turn nature data into decisions, whether it's biodiversity, land use, climate strategy. He's a systems thinker who's been building impact-driven ventures for over 2 decades. Hey, Marco.
Hi, Nick. Glad to be in your session here.
Next up, Maria Roquette Gordia, Environmental and Climate Tech Senior Project Manager at Zulu Ecosystems. Maria works where tech meets ecology, and she builds tools that help people and nature thrive together, from restoring forests to scaling nature-based climate solutions. Hi, Maria.
Hi, nice to be here.
Last but not least, Julian Goebel, Managing Director and Lead Customer Success at Envoria. Julian makes ESG reporting less painful. Yes, it's possible. And he helps companies go from spreadsheets to real trackable sustainability performance. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for the introduction.
All right. Greetings to our speakers, and thanks for being here with us. One thing to our audience, don't forget we have a live chat running. So if you have any questions during the panel, drop them in. We'll try to cover as many as we can in the final Q&A session. All right, let's jump in. And the first question would be, what's shaping the European green tech landscape right now? From where you sit, guys, what trends or policy shifts are shaping green tech in Europe, and how's that impacting the way we build and grow tech teams? Marco, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the big elephant in the room is the Omnibus Directive, right, which is delaying some of the ESG reporting, mainly the CSRD compliance. So you have less companies that need to report on the CSRD. There's more uncertainty. You have a lot of companies at the moment shifting their investment decisions into the future. At the same time, you have a lot of AI-first startups entering the ESG reporting market. And so you have a little bit of a clash here because demand is at the moment a bit shifted into the future. But then you have a little bit of a oversupply right now. So I think it's at the moment quite an interesting situation to observe. Yeah.
Maria, want to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, my expertise is more in like United States and United Kingdom. I find from where I sit, there's like the whole politics and social aspect around what people demand from projects that follow ESGs. Usually it's like we find that there's like require more transparency and traceability in a lot of these. Like people just want to know exactly what's going on, they don't want to just you talking about it, but they want to see the actual impact, and like they just want to see the numbers and the evidence. And I think from my experience, that's what's kind of shaping a lot of what we're developing has to meet those requirements. So we got to build things that the tech has to provide that transparency and that traceability throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Julian, anything to add to the guys' answers? Yeah.
Yes. Like Marco said, it's the elephant in the room. So it's the omnibus in the European Union, especially. However, I think it's very interesting because, like said, that a lot of companies are now like reshifting their resources. They think about reallocating that to other regulations or even other processes, which I think isn't bad at all. However, the interesting thing about that is, I mean, why is there regulation? Because there's regulation because the companies itself on their own did not manage to meet the target for our climate objectives. And so it's like a problem because we all know that we need to get there. So we've seen that in the last reports on global warming, that's very critical. So we need to do something. And the regulation actually wanted to push companies in that direction to do something. But in the end, now it's just shifting back. And hopefully we just see that the motivation is just coming back from the companies, that they understand that even if it's not the CSRD or any other regulation, it's something they need to do something. And I think that's the important one.
Can I add like one little thing? Because yeah, what said Julian, I was just thinking now, one of the things as well that is quite challenging around this is that we find that regulations sometimes are quite like outdated. Like you're working and realizing really fast and really fast paced with scientists, etc., and you start realizing that you should incorporate new aspects into these legislations, and you just feel like you have to be compliant, but at the same time you know that what you need to be compliant with is no longer relevant. And that's also something that's, you know, I wish there was more catalyzing kind of activity going on there, so we could be a bit more agile in the way that works. So that kind of stops us, I guess, in a way, to be more, you know, to move faster.
And if I may add here, I think what you see is a little bit of divide between the first movers, the pioneers, and the large companies that really have a long-term vision. They are obviously sticking to their sustainability strategies. They may communicate it a little bit less. It's a phenomenon called green hushing. So you're not actually shouting out your green engagement so loudly anymore, also with a view not only on the EU, but also especially on the US. But you're still preparing for the future, and that means that you're still already now getting all your data ready. You're doing basically your adaptation of your systems and so on. But then you have maybe the laggards and the smaller companies, and I think they are quite relieved that they have a little bit more time now to prepare for this. And this is, of course, a pity. Yeah? It's a lost opportunity. But at the same time, there's a little bit of a hope that once regulation kicks in again, it will be a little bit more clear, and then the smaller companies don't face so much uncertainty that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's a very good aspect of that, because regulation itself, it's like, it's not bad, so it has its targets and it wants to achieve something. So climate neutrality, for example. However, the way the regulation was designed in the past is somehow confusing or very heavy and very hard to really tackle for a lot of companies. So that's why we need to have two things. So one is, we need to have regulation because it doesn't work the other way. So that's the truth we do have. However, we need to have more assistance for companies who actually need to implement that regulations. So it should work from both ways in the end.
I think there needs to be a little bit of a pragmatism when it comes to the number of data points that are required. So far, all these regulations have come up with really a staggering amount of data points. And in Switzerland, we have a little bit a different example where they're really reducing the data points that you need to submit for ESG compliance. And I think that is probably a good example.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Yeah, thank you very much for the input. And yeah, from a broader ESG perspective, like we go to a more specific, teams question on how we build teams, to create impact. So what qualities define an effective climate-aligned tech team? Like when you're building or hiring for climate-focused tech teams, what qualities or values do you look for? And how do you make sure there is a real alignment with ESG goals? Maria, you want to take that?
Sure. So this is a good one. I feel like most of the time it's about finding people that care about the why as much as the what you're building. Like I think being an expert on your field is great. Like if you're an engineer, you know, being really good at the technical aspect of it is great. But I find that unless we speak the same language and we are mission aligned, conversations can get really hard. And there's a lot of trade-offs sometimes you got to do within those conversations. And so the more you can find people that will be mission driven, will have some sort of curiosity about learning from like these complex topics, like, you know, big climate topics that you're building solutions for, that does help a lot. So I mean, usually it's about just asking questions that kind of, if you're going to assess how that person thinks, just asking scenario best questions, maybe like, how you're like, how do you balance out like efficiency with like emissions when you're building like a type of tool or a new product, and just see how that person, not necessarily if it's a right or wrong question, it's more about like how that person reasons and like how they're willing to engage in a dialogue. I think that's key, because basically that's what they're going to be doing throughout. The minute they join the team, that's what's going to happen. Like they're going to have those hard conversations that are not just about technical detail of what they know. It's just, there's a lot of compromising and really in-depth discussions. That's mostly it. I mean, there's more. I mean, maybe I'll let other people's, if you guys have other things to do, like to say, but on the ESG specific things and like how do we align on that, that's also like a big a big topic. Yeah, but I don't know if Marco and Julian, you want to jump in now? Sorry.
Yeah, so at least I can just totally agree. So in the end, what we see when we do have hirings is, for example, so for me, very important is like what you call the engagement, and I would also add like the wording of motivation behind that. So like people needs to be motivated, although the environment might act against them. So meaning the customers, so they will just challenge them if it's really necessary, if they do anything which is not cost effective, etc. So you need to keep up with the motivation to really drive the change, and also like the motivation to not only push against but also to challenge what is existing, because we do have a lot of regulations, we do have a lot of setups, and the field of ESG is like that diverse. So when a lot of companies just say, okay, it's ESG, and so from my perspective, it's mostly, it's like very simplified, that you take all the ESG consultants together like in one pot, and say, okay, I can just pick any one of them to do the same service. However, the ESG field is that diverse that you do have specialists in specific areas and very many different backgrounds, whether it's tech focus, whether it's product focus, or whether it's like process regulation focus. So it's for most cases, for me, it's very important that there's the motivation to learn, to like think left or right, rather than having very much a set background, for example, in specific techniques, because it's like changing while we are speaking. There's regulation, there's content, there's new scientific information that change. So therefore, you can't stick to one only background. So you always have to change, and that's also for the teams itself. So they always have to adapt new researches, new technologies, etc.
Yeah, maybe
Marco?
to build on that. Yeah, sure. So green tech is dominated by a market that has many regulatory shifts, data uncertainties, field realities. So you need developers who are comfortable with ambiguity. I think that is super important. It's very cross-disciplinary. So you cannot have somebody who's really just like we call that subject idiot, somebody who's really just focus on one subject. You need to have people who are interested to venture a little bit into adjacent areas to really get the information that they need a little bit independently. And it can be very confusing. And then you also need to have people that are a bit pragmatic, because there is no perfect solution. It's such a complicated field. Like when you're looking at ESG in a company, you tap into so many different information sources. There's so many different ways to achieve basically your goal. You need to have really flexible people.
Can I add something on that? Because I feel like the other big thing I've noticed from experience is about empowering. Like you get into a team and you have your title, and that kind of I feel like sometimes you let that define your place in that company, which is fine, that you have that place, but you should be empowered to give your opinion beyond that if you have one. If you're like, if you're curious enough to have learned about certain topics that are part of the conversation, even though you're not the main specialist in that field within your company, you should feel empowered to provide and give and speak up that opinion. Because I found that when you do that, there's a lot of interesting conversations that happen. Like I've seen engineers challenge scientists about something specific, and then an amazing conversation has emerged from that, and a great outcome has come from that. And the challenge came from from an engineer who you wouldn't have thought would be the one to challenge that scientist. And I think that's really key as well.
Thank you, guys. And yeah, since we're talking about the teams, when it comes to scaling engineering capacity, how do you approach the decision between building in-house or working with external partners, providers? What usually drives that choice? Julian, maybe you wanna, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's just no one clear answer on that. So from our perspective, we see that ESG and ESG reporting more as from a generalistic view. So we want to have like a pragmatic approach. However, we also do have customers who say, okay, we need to have that specific expert or expertise in the software, in the solution. So we want to have like certifications on that. So it's somehow, yeah, you're more focusing those generalistic approaches. So it very much depends on what you want to achieve. And as I said, so the ESG topic, so sustainability in general, is very wide and very specific in parts. So that's where in those very specific areas, like for specific products, we like engage with external partners. However, from the business perspective, not only from our company, but also how we approach our customers is, I mean, in the end, it's the company itself driving the change for sustainability. So it's important that they don't outsource all their work to external partners. So they still keep the drive, the strategy, and the commitment of the company to really achieve specific sustainability goals in-house. So that's important. So my personal perspective is that like building the core around that, so specific for the company, to manage the direction, to steer that, needs to be built in-house. And for specific very special projects, you can just rely on external partners in those cases, and it will make sense because it will cost you a lot of development and engineering to really get to the same level as with the external partners who do, like, for example, life cycle assessment for the least 10 years, for example. So it's very hard to build that up.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah,
here.
maybe to build on that, yeah, I fully agree. So if it really depends a little bit on your long-term plan, right? If you just need to have a product shipped very quickly and you don't have the necessary resources in-house, obviously it makes a lot of sense to work with external providers. But then if you want to have a product stay for years, you need to have the core capabilities in-house because you may need to change your external partner after some time. And then you definitely want to have all the ability in-house to actually do that change.
Yeah, to keep all the knowledge in-house, definitely. Maria, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Marcus' point about the core knowledge. I think that's where I'd start. Like, there's a lot of IP you can develop. Like in nature tech, there's so many really tricky questions we want to answer, and that's where a lot of the revenue comes from. Just building these very, very clever products that answer very complicated questions. But I think when I've had to look at partnership, a lot of it had to do with limited resources in-house. A lot of data costs money, develop, like figuring out, like getting data to run certain analytics. That data costs money. So if you find people that are looking for collaboration, when I say people, I mean organizations that are data providers, for instance, that have alignment in your mission, that have similar principles and like the way they collect the data, like the accuracy of the data and so on, then I found that there's a lot of synergy that can happen there, and that's where a lot of collaboration comes in, when you can help each other out, you develop tools together, and then you provide feedback to those people, and then they develop better data that then you can use, and so on. That's mostly where I find like there's a lot of potential to partner up with external partners.
And now moving from teams to product, what makes it tricky to align product decisions with ESG goals? Can you maybe share a moment when your team had to balance a technical or protocol sustainability priorities? Marco, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I think it's a constant battle between aiming for high accuracy versus easy usability, right? Because of course, in the perfect world, you would have thousands of data points and could then, based on these data points, have like very, very accurate results. But then that is simply not possible in the real world. And that is also where we see the whole ESG movement struggling right now, right? Because a lot of companies, they struggle to get all these data points. So you need to focus on maybe a little bit the 80-20 rule, right? So you want to have with least effort the most accuracy that you can achieve in the quickest way, because then you have happy customers because it's just usable for them, right? And I think another trade-off is between like when you use AI between model accuracy and energy efficiency, right? How much AI do you want to use, or are you actually basically sabotaging your own ESG goals by the energy demand? Yeah, so you have a lot of trade-offs in product decisions.
I
Julian,
can relate to all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, Julian, you can go.
Yeah, so maybe just one aspect I would just like to add, because you just pointed out AI as like connection with the like energy consumption you use for those AI applications. However, I will also take that a little bit further, because we do have situations with our clients, with the market, so that they say, okay, we definitely want to have AI solutions with like sacrificing or with like challenging the data quality itself. So basically, AI is a very usable tool to assist you to reach specific goals, to maybe adapt specific targets, to get data consistency checks, etc. But what we currently experience, because of the market changing, because we do have like less capacities, less resources, and in the market for those ESG topics. Therefore, a lot of companies just think, okay, let's go for AI. It's more cost efficient and will still like present the same results, which is in fact not. So we do see a variety, because we want, on the other hand, to have like a regulatory aligned product, but on the other hand, the customer demand just ask for like the cases like where they want to simply just have a one-click button solution to provide their own sustainability reporting based on no data. So that's currently a gap, and I think we just meet in the middle. So to use AI reasonably in specific situations, but not that AI just takes all your work, so all your thinking. And that's also quite kind of challenge we do see in the market currently.
Yeah, I think it should be an enabler, shouldn't it? Like, sorry, Marco. Yeah, it should be. I think AI should be an enabler. Like, I find I find that same type of conversations happening as well, because there's a challenge of like, resources. There's always that conversation about how can we make resource efficient, like our process, etc. Like, I think from my experience around aligning and decision, like challenges around aligning, mostly is about rigor, like scientific rigor. In my case anyways, at Zulu, that's kind of, it's really like it can get really risky if you're not rigorous enough, like your analytics are not rigorous enough, then that's one of the highest risk. And to be honest, in the past few years, I think with all the greenwashing kind of topics and everything like that, even though there's like a lot of challenging discussions, the environmental like analytic rigor and like the scientific rigor is one that always wins. Like we always kind of make sure that that's at the forefront. And even though it's a challenge conversation to talk about whether it should be more we should make it more usable, user friendly, or we should be adding more power, computing power to it. So I know that because we're sort of aligned and we know where the, what the market is asking, and the current situation, like at least some of these trade-offs are easier to make because we were saying before, like teams are a bit, the team knows what the mission is, what's most important. So I definitely feel like that's, it's complicated, but I feel like some of these things are well known. And when it comes to AI, it comes within the, like when we talk about the rigor, that's where we're saying it's an enabler. You should never just put all the eggs in that one basket. You can use it to help you out, but
Yeah, because you have a little bit of a conflict, right, between the rigor and the reproducibility of results that you have in machine learning, right? So you can have
exactly
very varying results. You sometimes don't know exactly what's happening in the background. And of course, there's a lot of activity in that area that tries to get the reproducibility better. Yeah, another thing is that you mentioned this scientific rigor, and it always wins. At the same time, it's also important to understand that science is always evolving. So what is seen as rigorous today may not be seen as rigorous tomorrow, and you can't wait until tomorrow. So you need to live with what is there today. And I think it's super important for the whole ESG movement to also understand that it's work in progress, and it's very difficult to aspire complete perfection. You need to really have a little bit of trade-off sometimes to actually go to a result that is meaningful today. And you need to be ready to change your calculations, your methods tomorrow if there's new scientific evidence, and that's completely fine.
Yeah, I find like that's really important actually. And one of the things that we find more and more now about like it's all about traceability and transparency. So as long as you're clear about, it's ever evolving and you're able to communicate where we are now and how it changes, then I think that's all it matters. You just got to be really honest as you can be about that. And I think that kind of helps everyone understand, you don't feel lied to, you don't, and everybody just kind of understands better where we're going and like what's the intention. So yeah, I think you're right on that for sure.
All right. On the next one, I think we have already touched a bit on this on previous questions, but still, I mean, maybe you have anything to add. How do you get engineers, scientists, and other stakeholders working well together? What has helped you build a real collaboration around ESG goals? So yeah, Maria, maybe you wanna, take that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we probably talked a lot about this, and I think I'm really passionate because that's one of the things I've been doing for quite a few years now at Zulu. But I think as I was saying, the main thing is about making sure everybody speaks the same language. And it's important that we just create that space for people to bounce ideas off and understand where everybody's coming from. So the important thing is that when you're discussing things and then you have these trade-offs conversations, which will happen, you always have the scientists probably talking about the rigor and like how everything needs to be perfectly, perfect. And others will talk more about like just being more agile and build a product that slowly kind of provides the value, but at increments. And so on. And I think the main thing is that it's okay for everybody to have different opinions on how we should build something. It's just about making sure that those conversations take us into like a consensus. And so I'm going back to the idea of it's important that people understand the mission. Like, why are we talking about this? essentially that what is that is we're essentially building here and why. And then it's as simple as that. And then as long as people are aligned with that, then conversations can happen and people can start seeing why, you know, someone is fighting more for rigor and others are fighting more for speed. And people will be more inclined to give in if they know it's for the better good, which is building a tool that gives us what we need right now. And then the next stage we can talk about what we haven't built right now, but you know, we can build at a later stage. And I think it's more about that, fostering that collaboration, and just empowering people to give their opinion, make them feel heard, be part of the conversation, and then all together coming up to a consensus. I think usually that's what's worked for me really well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Maria. Julia, anything to
Yeah.
add?
So I definitely agree to all of your points mentioned. So I think it's important that we just provide an environment where exchange is possible and it's open. So we allow open exchange between different like departments or different backgrounds. And what it helps you to like drive or to thrive for a specific target is that you somehow define the direction. So you don't need to define the exact product in the end, and you don't need to define the path on how the product needs to be designed in certain steps. However, you need to somehow align on the vision of what you want to achieve in the end and what it should be. And then having like different backgrounds and different teams is actually like a, a very big benefit, a very big asset to have that, because it allows exchange on different ways. And in most cases, what I experience is, of course, you do have engineers who are more focused on like a simply way or a more user-friendly way or a database correct way, for example. However, in the end, it's mostly like a project or like a solution they drive together. So both engineers, scientists, and even other stakeholders, we just put all the different views together, and in the end, it's somehow that we meet in the middle. Or it's in some cases for some products, it's like we are more on the engineer side, more on the scientist side, and in the end, we still achieve the same goal in the end. However, we don't let, and that's, I think it's a good way, that you don't predefine which way to go. So you just define that there is a way to go, and you define like a general target. And then in the end, like you said, so we talked about changeability, motivation, changing environments, changing basics, actually, when it comes to scientific research. So in the end, there cannot be that one path. So you always have to adapt. And I think that's the best way to align that, to have that environment and to really allow that environment. So just not having exchanges because you need to have them, but to have really exchanges where every where every person then can have his own minds, his own opportunities, and share his own thoughts. And in the end, you align that to one target or even more targets in the end.
Yeah, I think Julian and Maria both raised really valuable points. Maybe one instrument that is really useful is to have company-wide learning sessions, or at least cross-teams learning sessions, especially from the scientists to the tech team, to really make them understand what exactly is the overall target. So I have an example here at Swarmy. Next week, we'll have a session where our data scientists will demonstrate a database that stores labels in a structured way to train AI. And then it's going to be a live demonstration. The rest of the team, they can then select an orthophoto, so kind of a geo-located photo. And then that will be inserted into that system, and then the output will be the number of cars and their locations. And through this, it's a little bit a playful way to engage. And through this, actually, the tech team really understands, oh, okay, so this is the challenge. This is actually the technical challenge that the scientists have. And then you can really pull together as a team in one direction.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, maybe Zulu ecosystems is a bit of a different thing. Like one of the things that I find is really useful is site visits. I mean, we restore land, so just going on site to understand how the operations teams work, have a sense of how they like their challenges, actually work with the tools we've built for them to survey the land, for instance, and leave firsthand what the pain points are. Then you get a full sense of kind of what you're saying, Marco, like playful way of getting a firsthand what the challenges are, so that then you can go back to your desk and start talking about, you know, what you've learned and how to apply those learnings into the new development that you're going to do. And the other thing, I don't know if you do this much, but hackathons or like some sort of session like this, I find they're fun. Usually you can do topics that maybe they're not like the main development themes that you're working on at that moment in time, so like not the most critical development pieces, but something more innovative, something that people find it super interesting, and that really boosts like a lot of the motivation. People get excited about it, and at the end of it, you've built something that, you know, may or may not be part of your end product, but it definitely kind of helps build that collaboration, and people learn a lot about ways of working together, for sure.
Yeah. So something interesting you just mentioned is you do have on-site visits, and like one question I do always ask myself is it good in the current environment in companies that a lot of like home office is going on, so a lot of mobile work? So do you see that as an advantage in that regard, or do you see that as a new challenge, or like another challenge in communication, because you want to like have like close conversation, but in the end, in most cases, you don't sit together, so each one is sitting at home or mobile or remotely working. So that's kind of interesting for me. How do you see that?
Yeah, this is really like a really good question. I mean, Zulu was born during COVID era, so we didn't meet each other at the beginning until 6 months later. So a lot of the processes I've built are basically really about working remotely, but very efficiently. We do see that as your company grows, there's that need of like being able to be in the same room. So I do think that we have to strike the balance between, you know, having those, you know, like you couldn't do a hackathon online, you know, like you couldn't do certain workshops online. They need to happen, like the magic happens when you're like there in the same room. But I do think that, you know, I do think that there's a lot of agile processes that work really well. If you have a good process, you can do them remotely. You can build systems around, you know, to work together with different teams, which is what I do. And they work well remotely, but you just have to have the right process, and you have to have everybody that will be part of that process involved in the conversation that will help shape that process. It never works when you impose like anything. So my experience is that it can work with a balance. You will also have to have moments where you meet, and throughout the process the way of working will change, will shift. People will join in, there's going to be shifts in preference, and you have to adapt. You have to be agile in how then that process changes. And so the last thing I'd say is that the best thing to adapt is to run retros. Like I'm a big fan of retros. Every 2 weeks, you meet with the team, you talk about how it went, you learn about the way of working, what's not working, you listen, and you try and work together to figure out how to better the way you work together, basically. And
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to elaborate a little bit more on that site visit point, because I think that's super important. So I think especially if you're spending a lot of time at the home office, I've seen that during my time at South Pole, we had a really large tech team. It was COVID times. We sometimes really had the situation that the tech team, they understood something a little bit different than what actually the people on the ground understood. So you need to align that. So you really need to go to the site from time to time and actually really align on definitions, like, okay, what this is, this is what I mean, right? And especially when you're working on nature related topics, I think it's super important to just go to nature together. I think it's really great for kind of bonding and for really getting kind of this common team sense and the feeling of, oh yeah, that's why we work, right? That's what we want to preserve.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you guys for bringing up real life examples. I mean, it's very valuable to hear from you. Let's take a look at the questions that we have in the chat. And yeah, the first question is from Asila Ilias. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sorry for that. So the question is, just out of curiosity, how can science-based sustainability professionals integrate tech in their skill set? What could be a starting point for them, in your opinion? Who wants to take that?
A science base, can you repeat that quickly?
Yeah, well, I think they mean how people with a science background, sustainability professionals, can integrate tech in their skill set. I'm not sure if there's a question about someone with a science background starting to work for a green tech startup as a developer, or just trying to understand better developers who they work with. But yeah, we can take it from different angles.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a science background, you're already used actually to working with relatively complicated tools that have a tech component, because you're usually already working with data, right? So it's not completely different. So it's more or less the interface looks different, but you're still working on a lot of calculations and so on. And maybe you need to let go a little bit, because if you're working all these tools, you're not anymore the one that actually builds the formula, right? So you need to actually sometimes give a little bit trust to the tech products that you work with. But overall, I mean, it's similar. It's similar work, right? You have your input data, and you want to have certain output, and you need to assess whether a certain tool works for you or not, and achieves that result, right?
Are you wanted to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if my answer will be relevant to this person exactly, but I've had few times. One of the ways that I've seen scientists kind of get more into the tech part of, like, and learning more about the tech side of things is usually just collaborating with a scientist, like with an engineer, to develop a new solution very closely. Like, I find most of the time, a scientist will approach something from a very scientific point of view, with very tools that are specifically for research, not so much for like developing products. And it's challenging at times for that scientist to kind of shift, which is totally understandable. And I find like the best way to bridge that gap is by just explaining what you're thinking about to an engineer, and just kind of bounce ideas and build on that together, and just figure out what set of skills you're maybe missing that would be helpful for next time you're kind of thinking about developing that yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just one thing to add, because this actually, the prerequisite of having that is that you do have contact to like an engineer, so that you do work in a company and actually can sit maybe together also. So we use that, for example, we do have like tech boot camps where we also invite like our professionals, and so they understand better what the techs are discussing, so what the solutions are. However, I mean, the prerequisite is that you do have that option. However, like Marcus said, it's fairly simple, because you do have all the tools that already in place, although it's labeled in a different way, so not like code. However, it's always the same procedure. So you do have a target you want to achieve, whether it's a website, whether it's a calculation tool, or anything like that. And then you just have to think of step by step on how to achieve that. So what kind of data do you need? how the data should be processed, what are the use cases you do have, and simply as that, it's of course it's oversimplified, but that's the same logic the IT does on the other end. So they define like their use cases, and so you basically have the same way, the same direction. And so if you go from the thing you want to achieve, so from the objective, and you trace that back and get more granular, I think you just get a very good understanding on how the IT will also approach that. So because they are starting on the other way, and you both have to meet. So that's basically just your starting point into like the IT stuff. And of course, like, I mean, it really much depends on your ambitious level. When you really want to go into coding, I think there are, especially when it comes to like coding practices, there are a lot of free sources out on the market where you can just simply like create your own websites, or like simply programs to get that started.
Yeah, and I would actually really recommend that. I think if you want to have tech in your skill set, you should have a foundation of programming know-how, and it's really easy nowadays to get into programming. And I think it's really fun. It's like playing games. So it's actually a really cool pastime to start venturing a little bit into coding.
True. Thank you, guys. Thanks for practical pieces of advice. And last one, probably also from the chat. Any advice on convincing management that ESG isn't just a checkbox?
Classical.
Yeah.
Maybe I can start with that. ESG is actually at the core of an organization. The data that you need to assess your ESG compliance, your level, and so on, taps into all different departments of your organization. So it's actually a really good starting point to have kind of a central intelligence over your organization. And to then be also able to compare that with the market, other organizations, and so on. And that is basically independent of regulation. Yeah, so that is something that will help you to manage your company better. And there are a lot of studies that show that if you're putting enough effort into your ESG reporting and the ESG data, your company will, in average, actually perform better. If you do that, that is anyway worth the effort. Plus, then on top of it, you will get better employee engagement, you will have better client engagement, and eventually you will have better reporting once you need to report.
Julian, Maria, any advice on convincing management on top of what Marcus said?
Well, in the most situations, I think what convinces management is like to have green or especially like black figures. So meaning if the cost benefit analysis just actually works out. And I think that could be some kind of a like more number-based approach to that, although I completely agree to everything what Marcus said. But in addition, sometimes it helps to like display some sort of return on investment. And in fact, what we see is that the majority of banks actually try for better terms and conditions for their companies with more focus on ESG, better ESG data. So we do have actual impacts also on refinancing and insurance, for example. So there are a lot of different side fields where improving ESG data quality not only increases or enhances your decision making, but also gives you effectively cost reductions towards like other competitors or other market participants. And what we currently see so we do have a lot of customers in the supply chain of OEMs, so with the large car manufacturers. And they, for example, provide their suppliers like with frameworks, so they dictate that somehow. And if you, as the supplier, you don't fulfill that regulations, you will be just out of business. So that will not be your customer any longer. So you will actually lose customer connection and effectively it's resulting in lack of revenues, lack of cash flow. So you do have a lot of consequences on that. So therefore, sometimes like a very rough cost benefit estimation might also help you to, in the end, convince the management as well.
Yeah, I think from my experience, it's compliance. Like, I think that's one of the main things that helps convince management, really.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think we're done with all of the questions that we have. Thank you very much, guys, for engaging and answering to all of the questions. It was like, I mean, for me personally, and I'm sure that for all of the guys who joined, I mean, it was very valuable, to hear it from you, the answers to the questions that we prepared. So yeah, big thanks to all of you for the insights and the stories. It's much appreciated. And as we wrap up, big thank you to everyone who joined us today. And before you go, feel free to scan the here it is, QR code on the screen, and it'll take you to a Beetroot community space. We've been building a vibrant group of people who care about sustainability, tech, and creating real impact. So would love to see you there too. We regularly host webinars, panel discussions on meaningful, timely topics. And through that QR code, you can join our community, access recordings of the past events, stay in the loop for what's next. Happy to keep the conversation going. Let's make an impact together. Thank you again for being a part of it. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much, Nick, and larger Beetroot team for having us. It was a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.